So the voltage block from Malekko is a CV sequencer that has 8 channels. I have to be honest, this is one of the best additions I got for my case. It opens up the whole system. It's easy to use. It has some interesting features we will look at today. And of course, as always, nothing is perfect. So the only issue I have with it is that it will only go from 0 to positive 5 volts. We will look later at a few examples on how it affects a patch. But let's really start with the first thing I love about it, and that's the ability to record modulation. So I have here the Moog slicer from Behringer. I often use it as a clock to drive or to clock the voltage block. So let's make the connection. I have it split here. This is clocking the mimiophone once, and I will use it to clock also the voltage block. Already you can see that it's running. And I have the TSL oscillator from Instruo going to Freak from Volt. Freak in this case is an MS-20 style stereo low pass filter. So I'm sending the pulse output and the fold output to Freak. From there it's going to the mimiophone. Again, the mimiophone is being clocked also by the Moog slicer. And I have the Moog slicer sequencing the TSL through the harmony also from Instruo, so it will sound like this. Oh yes. So first of all, we can sequence the cutoff of the filter with the voltage block. So I will select channel 1 by hitting select here, shift, and then I will make sure that only channel 1 is active. This is channel 1. Now let's send this already to the filter. So channel 1 will go to the CV input of the filter of Freak, and now by holding the step I want to change and moving the respective fader, in this case it will be this fader here, we can set or program the sequence. So let's say step 1, I want the filter to be like this, open, and then another one, something a bit different. So I have 3 steps. Programmed, so it's really easy to program, but again, this is programming a sequence, and I want to show you that it can also record modulation, record the movement. So let's clear this channel again by hitting shift, making sure only channel 1 or track 1 is selected, and then hitting clear. And now this sequence is erased. And now as long as the sequencer is running, the voltage block is running, I can move the respective fader. Again, in this case it's fader number 1, and it will record the movement of the fader. So let's do this really. Let's start from here. So I just move the fader, and as the sequence progresses, it will record to each of the steps the position of the fader. Now it's still a bit rigid, it's still a stepped sequence, a stepped signal, but we can add slew to it from within the voltage block and make it a smooth modulation source. So again, I will hit shift, I will make sure that channel 1 is selected, and then here we have the smooth function, and I can go step by step and add slew to the different steps. And now if you listen to it, you will see that the modulation is smooth. Very nice. So I recorded again the movement of the fader without programming anything, just by moving the fader as long as the sequencer is running. And it recorded this movement, which is quite cool. We can do the same also for the pulse width of the pulse wave and the fold also. So let's use channel 2. Let's do something like this, and channel 3. And now I will again hit Shift. In this case I will select channel 2. And again let's record something like this. And again let's add slew to it by adding smooth function to each of the steps. Let's also record something for channel 3. And again add smooth to it. You can see how easy it is. Oh yes. So you can see how easy it is to add movement to the patch. I have here also the Basimilus as a droning bass sort of. It's being triggered by Harmonig, and I'm just sending it offset to have it tuned together with the TSL. Let's send this to the Desmodus Versio. Oh yeah. So the feature of the voltage block that is probably the most exciting is the fact that each channel, each sequence can have its own length, its own clock division, and can run in different directions, which is huge and can add so much variation to any patch. So here again I'm using the Moog slicer to drive the voltage block, and I have sequence 1 going through Harmonig and sequencing the Basimilus, and the Basimilus is going through Magneto and the Desmodus Versio. It will sound like this. So this is the sequence. Now I also have the TSL going through Athru or Aheru, the wave folder from Instruo, and size, the envelope from Instruo, is gated by the Moog slicer, and it's opening the folder, which makes the folder a sort of a VCA in this case. I can just open the attenuverter here. This is going through the mimeophone. Now we can use the voltage block, we can use another sequence of the voltage block to sequence the pitch of the TSL, again by recording the movement. So I will use sequence 2, and I will select sequence 2, make sure it's selected. And now I can go ahead and record the sequence. Let's open the decay a bit. So now there's a sequence recording, and the voltage block has also built-in scales. So the sequence can be quantized as well. You don't need a quantizer even. So I will use the minor scale in this case. Again, make sure the sequence I want to use is selected, and then I will hit scale, and by moving the fader I choose between the different scales. Minor is this one here, and now we have it. Quantized to a minor scale. Let's open this a bit more. Very nice. So we have another sequence. And the first thing we can do is set sequence 2 to have, for example, only 7 steps. So again, I will make sure that sequence 2 is selected. And then here we have the length control. In this case, it's 16. I want to have 7, which is here. So now you see sequence 2 has 7 steps. Sequence 1, if I go back to sequence 1, it still has 16 steps, but again sequence 2 has only 7, which is quite cool. Let's have another sequence that will modulate the decay time of size, that will do this. So I will select sequence 3 and let's send it already to the decay input, CV input of size. And now again I can record something. So now I have another sequence sequencing the decay time of size, and I can now let it run in a division of the clock. Here we have the divide knob. Again, making sure this sequence is selected. And now each light is a division. So the first step is divided by 1, divided by 2, divided by 3, divided by 4, and so on. Let's divide it by 3. 1, 2, and 3. So you can see this sequence is now running slower. Only this sequence. And this is the sequence that's modulating the decay time of size. Very nice. I have another voice coming from Freak. Again, it's a low pass filter. In this case, it's self-oscillating, so there is nothing going to the input, but the output is going to microcell for some reverb. And let's have channel 4 sequence this voice sequence, the Freak. So I will send it to the cutoff point CV input. This will control the pitch. And now I will select sequence 4. And again, let's record something. Let's see. And again, I will quantize it to the minor scale. Which is this voice. Very nice, but now we can have sequence 4 with only 5 steps, let's say. So again, I will make sure this is selected, hit length, we have 16, I just want 5, which is here. And now this sequence has only 5 steps, and we can let it run also in different directions. We have forward, reverse, pendulum, so left and right, and then random as well. Let's go with pendulum, so I will hit shift. This sequence is selected, and then I will select pendulum, and now you can see it's going left and right. This is the sequence. Very cool. So now each sequence is running differently with a different number of steps. and as you can hear, this can add lots of movement and variation to any patch. Now, the voltage block has also randomness control or randomness feature that will create a random sequence, which is great for just experimenting and letting the module decide for you, but we can also use it to generate random gates with random lengths. So here I have a looping function from Rampage. This is controlling the internal VCA of Psych from Instruo. Psych is receiving a 4-note chord from Harmonic, and this is going through a low-pass filter and microcell for some reverb. It will sound like this. Now by changing, I can open the filter a bit. By changing the rise and fall times of Rampage of this function, I can change how the voice is coming in and out, quicker or slower. Just like this. So let's really use the voltage block for this. I will clock the voltage block with the end of cycle output of Rampage of this function. So with each cycle we will get a new step, we will get a new function. So let's use this cable here. End of cycle will go to the clock input. And now you can see with each cycle we get the next step. And now we can randomize channel 1, for example, and use it to sequence the rise times of Rampage. So with the shift function, I just make sure that it's the sequence 1 that I want to randomize, and here we have the random function. If I hit it, now all of the steps will be randomized without even programming or recording anything. So let's use this to modulate or sequence the rise time. So let's do something like this. So now with each cycle we get a new function, or a function with a different rise times, with a different rise time. Let's add some delay here from the microcell. We can use another sequence, sequence 2, to control the fall times as well. So again, I will select sequence 2 and then I will hit the random function. Maybe you can already see the light here is changing on sequence 2 because now each step is a different value, and the voltage block randomized this sequence. So let's use it to control the fall times. Let's find a nice sweet spot. Here that we get different results with each cycle, something sort of a semi-generative, and we can make this even more generative by setting the sequences to run randomly as well. As we've seen before, we can change the direction of each sequence. So let's set sequence 2 to run also randomly, so it has random notes and it will run randomly, and sequence 1 as well. So now we get something that will always change, always evolve. Now this is great to just quickly add movement and variation with one click, just clicking the random button and you have a random sequence. but this can also be useful for generating random gates with random lengths. So let's see how this works. I have here again the TSL going to freak. I have the pulse output and the fold output going to freak, again a low pass filter, a stereo low pass filter, but in this case I'm using the built-in VCA of freak, and I will use the second function of rampage to open this VCA. So let's use the yellow cable. Output B will go to the, in this case it's the drive input, but this will open the VCA of freak. Now this is going through the mimeophone. So let's randomize sequence 3. I will select sequence 3 and randomize it. Let's also set it to run randomly. And now I will send this sequence 3 to the input of the second function, not the trigger input, but the signal input. So let's do this. Just like this. Already you can hear this voice coming in. So now whenever the sequence from the voltage block is going above a certain point, the voltage goes above a certain threshold, the function will be triggered, and as long as this signal stays above this point, the function will stay open, the function will sustain. This is why I'm using the signal input and not the trigger input, so I can have also the sustain stage. And since the sequence is random and also running randomly, we will get different gate lengths, and the voice will come in and out at different times and with more or less sustain. Just like this. I have here a sequence 4 as a pitch sequence that I can use for the TSL. So let's really use this, and we have also some pitch variation. So you can hear how this voice, the TSL, is coming in and out. Sometimes it stays longer, sometimes it stays shorter, depending on the sequence and how the steps are connected, or the voltage is connected or not connected, and will sustain more or will sustain less. The function from rampage. Let's add also a nice steady bass to it with the Bassimilus. I will trigger it with the Moog slicer, sorry. Oh yeah. Another really nice feature of the voltage block is the fact that we can drive it, we can address it with other control voltage signals, and not only with clock signals, just by switching this switch here to CV, from clock to CV. Now of course also clocks are control voltage, but it's easy to understand. This is clock and this is CV. Now this can work really nicely with something like the Morphagene. So I have a flute recorded on the Morphagene. It's going through the Desmodus Versio. Sounds like this. Very nice. And now we can use the CV output, the envelope follower output of the Morphagene, to drive the voltage block. So I'm going to use this cable here, and it's going to the clock CV input. And now we can attenuate the signal, or we can open the attenuation a bit or a lot. You can see how this is moving. We can also offset this signal. So instead of it starting at step 1, it can start at step 5, for example. Let's bring it back to step 1. So we can really, with any control voltage, we can really set exactly how we want it to affect the voltage block. And now we can create a sort of a modulation feedback loop by using the voltage block to modulate, for example, the gene size of morphogene, so how much of the sample it will play back. So let's use sequence 8 for this. I will select sequence 8, and just for now I will just randomize everything. And I'm using sequence 8 just so the cable will reach everything. So now the morphogene is driving the voltage block, which is in turn modulating or sequencing the gene size. We can do the same, let's say sequence 7, again I will randomize it for the slide, so this will move the sample playback along the sample. So we can create interesting loops. Let's use another sequence, sequence 6. Again, I will randomize it to modulate or to sequence the morph, which will add more playheads in this case. And we can create interesting rhythms. And by changing the parameters or the modulation, can create interesting loops and rhythms again. And again, the morphogene with the CV output, with the envelope follower that will follow the amplitude envelope of this flute, this will drive, this will address the voltage block. And again, as we've seen before, we can use the sequence from the voltage block to generate also gates and drive other modules. So let's use one sequence to drive the MOOC slicer. So I will use, let's say, sequence 5. Again, I will randomize it just because it's nice and easy. And this will go to the clock input of the MOOC slicer. So now, according to how high the voltage on this sequence, on sequence 5, it will drive the MOOC slicer. You can see the lights here. You can see that it's moving. And let's use the MOOC slicer to generate pitch information for the basimilus with the help of the harmonic. And the basimilus is going through the mimeophone, so I will use the common output to the harmonic. Oh yeah. And again, just by changing the parameters on the morphogene, you will get something totally new. And I can also offset this here. And now if this is too quick on the MOOC slicer, we can always divide the clock. We have here a built-in clock divider and multiplier. Let's take this flute 1 octave down. Oh So we can create really interesting feedback modulation by addressing the voltage block with other control voltage signals instead of clock signals. Of course, we can use LFOs, we can use other sequencers, envelopes, and so on, and create really interesting results and loops and whatnot. I have here another voice coming from Psych, going through Freak, again low pass filter in this case, and to the microcell for some reverb. Another small but interesting feature of the voltage block is the reset and hold input. Now when using the voltage block with a clock, the reset will act as in any other sequencer. It will reset the sequence so it starts all over again. But when using the voltage block with CV and using a gate, the gate will hold the sequences as long as it's high. So we can create sorts of glitches and more complex sequences. Here I have the Moog slicer driving the voltage block with CV, with the sequence itself. This is triggering or sequencing the basimilus, going through Freak, again in this case a low pass filter, and the mimeophone. And now we will do something like this. Let's set both envelopes or functions of Rampage to cycle, and I will trigger them also. So now they are cycling, now they are looping. And we will use two sequences from the voltage block to sequence their fall times. So let's use sequence 8 for example, and I will just randomize it, and also sequence 7, and I will randomize it. And now I will take one and send it to the full CV input of one, and looping envelope or looping function, and another sequence to the other. And now we will use the comparator output of Rampage, which will output a gate as long as function B is greater than function A. So we will use it to gate the hold function and get glitches in the sequence and create a more complex sequence. So I will take the comparator output. You can see here the lights. I hope you can see this if I take the cable out maybe. You can see the lights exactly whenever the gate is going high and low. So let's use this to the hold function. And you can hear, let's take the noise away. So you can hear how it's creating a more complex sequence, and also here by changing the fall times we will get different results. Something like this for example. Sequence. Again, this is without. And this is with. And now we can use two more sequences from the voltage block. Again, they are glitching and being held according to the comparator from Rampage. We can use two more sequences to modulate or to sequence the both channels of freq, the left and right. So let's use sequence 6, randomize it, 5, randomize it, and let's see what will happen. 1, and the right channel as well. Okay, I have here a loop coming from the loop performance true. It's going through a Lopez filter and microcell for some reverb. Sorts of effects here on Arbor. I have it in wavetable mode, and I can just bring it in. Just like this. So now let me show you what I mean by that the range of the voltage block is not enough. Really, this is the only issue I have with the voltage block. I'm pretty sure this cannot be changed in a firmware update, but maybe it's time for a voltage block Mark II. So here I have psych going to a low pass filter, and I want to use the voltage block to modulate the filter. Now this will be the full range of the cutoff point. And the voltage block will go to about half the distance. Again, the filter. And with the voltage block. If we go again to the morphogene, for example, I want to modulate the gene size. Also here it will not go all the way. So this will go to the CV input. This is the full range. And with the voltage block. So it's not going all the way up. The same will be with Arbor, for example. So here I have Arbor with the scan. I can scan through the recording. You can see this white light here moving from left all the way right. Again, this is the full range. But with the voltage block, it will go to about, you see, about half the way. So this will be the full range with the voltage block. Again, it's not going all the way. If I have something that I want to modulate, a recording, and I want to modulate or to sequence with the voltage block, I will not get the full range, which is quite a shame. But again, this is the only thing that I have an issue with when it's coming to the voltage block. And by the way, this is not always the case. There are modules that will work great with this range, but it would be nice to have an option to select between different ranges. I mean, we can select here different scales, so why not have also the option to select another or different ranges, also to have negative values. But again, other than this, the voltage block is super useful and can add a lot to any system. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share, and cheers.